Here's why we needed to have you on, because what we do, we're sports, we're business, we're culture, entertainment, politics.
Yeah, you guys are
But
everything. Yeah.
we really need our audience to understand a few things because there's a bit of misinformation out there about different things that are happening in our country. And I wanted to, what we're trying to do, Katie, now this may be different for you because
Okay.
we're going to focus on the independent nature of you being an independent journalist. We're
Okay.
not coming at this totally from one side or the other. We're trying to talk about what is real and what is not. And I want to start with something, and I want to start with what is happening with people when they are being stopped on the street, when they are being asked for their papers, when they are asked for ID. Are they in danger of actually being deported? Is that what ICE is doing? Could it be anybody walking at any particular moment and all of a sudden their life just gets completely blown up?
Yeah. So all kidding aside, David, number one, thank you for having me. And hey, Coca. Look, here's the deal. I agree that everybody should only be dealing with facts, evidence, truth. I like to say that that's my currency. That's what I traffic in. So here are the facts. In some instances, there's not even an effort, David, by Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement and other federal agents. Let me be clear. There have been aid provided by other law enforcement agencies and departments to be able to effectuate the deportations and in some instances kidnappings. And the reason why I say that, David, is because some of these people that are being stopped and taken into custody are either the wrong people or they had legal status because they had gone through the process of applying for asylum, for example, or they had temporary protected status, and all of that has now been revoked. And so even though they thought that they were traveling in a legal path to be able to obtain citizenship, because of revocations or because of changes that were made in this administration, they are now deemed to be, quote, illegal. And that is the reason why they're being rounded up. The problem that we have, and I think anybody, and it really shouldn't make a difference what your political affiliation is. The problem we have is there's a lack of due process. And that phrase gets thrown around a lot. And a lot of people make it a punchline, and they really shouldn't, because it doesn't make a difference who you are, Democrat, Republican, Independent, or otherwise. You should always want to have the due process that you're afforded under the Constitution. And what I keep on saying to people is the following. The United States Constitution does not make a distinction between being a U.S. citizen or not a U.S. citizen when it comes to due process. If you are here on United States soil, you are allowed and you are afforded the opportunity to be able to defend who you are and your ability to stay here on U.S. soil before you're summarily sent somewhere else, whether it's back to your home country or whether it's sent in some instances to a country that's not even your home country. We have people that are residents that are being sent to other countries. And so what you need to be aware of is we are seeing so many videos of people that aren't even wearing identifiable markings that show that they are law enforcement. So it's obviously creating an environment or an atmosphere of fear and terror because we're seeing all these videos in social media where people are being just taken into custody, arrested, and plainclothes officers. And listen, I will say this till the end of the day. I'm a big fan of law enforcement. I always say when you have a problem, you call 911, you call the police. The police are there to protect and serve. But it's also creating this fear and this hostility of, I don't know if you're even a real cop. I don't even know if you're a real
Well,
federal agent and you're taking me into custody.
that's something that obviously you heard from yesterday's show, and everybody's talking about what happened in Minnesota and how people, if you dress up as a police officer, you still may be the person who's doing the murdering. I want to explain to people the concept of due process because you
Please.
touched on it by saying it is a huge important issue. I'm a lawyer, not practicing like you, but I went to law school, passed the bar, and I get asked this a lot. What is the most important freedom you have? What's the most important right that you have? I'm asked that. And people would say freedom of expression, freedom of the press, freedom of religion. And I actually say the most important thing for me is that I'm guaranteed due process. And what I mean by that is that I don't have to risk, and it's not because of my color, even though people argue it is. In theory, I don't have to risk ever getting in trouble without the opportunity to prove that I'm not that guy or I'm not the one to have gotten in trouble. So due process to me matters. Talk about how there's none, because I've got stories of people, and whether it's nannies or people who are helpers of homes out on Long Island who are getting stopped. They are asked for ID. They show ID. It's 1 minute, and then that's the end of the conversation. There's others who are getting stopped, don't have ID, and it becomes a little more complicated. Why is that not the proper due process?
Well, let's start with this baseline question. Do you have your passport on you when you walk around, David?
In a foreign country, every second.
Okay. But if you're not in a foreign country, if you're in the United States and you're in your car, you're walking down the street, do you have your passport on you?
I do not. No.
And you're a United States citizen, right?
Yes.
So envision a
I love being examined by you, Katie. I love this. Keep going.
But here, and you are obviously not of, let's just say you're not of a Hispanic heritage, right?
I am quite white and Jewish.
Okay. So while you walk down the street with your white privilege, you are probably not going to be worried that you're not carrying your United States passport or a social security card or something of that ilk on you. So if you're stopped by law enforcement, how do you prove who you are? You'll probably produce your driver's license, for example, right? So in this instance, if you don't have your US passport, you're not going to be fearful that you're going to be taken into custody because, to your point, you're going to be given a chance to be able to say, no, you've got this wrong. You're looking for David Samson with a P, right? I am not David Samson with a P. Like, if you are sitting in, I mean, and I've been sent a lot of these videos too, David. Like, they're going to places like Home Depot and they're going and they're just rounding up people that happen to be black or, brown, and they're taking them into custody and they are asking the questions after they've taken them into custody. That is a serious problem that we have here. They're also going to people's places of work. Now, the hypocrisy is pretty rank, I think, if I may, that there's now going to be a backpedaling by the Trump administration as to immigration, customs, and enforcement raids on hotels and other agricultural facilities. You have to ask yourself, well, why? Well, because they've been doing that. They've been going to hotels and restaurants and service industries, and they've been taking people into custody. And here's the thing. They are taking people into custody and they are not giving them the chance to appear in front of a judge to be able to say, my name is X. By the way, yes, I may be here in the United States and I may not have proper documentation, but if I'm returned to this country, I actually may be killed, I may be persecuted, I may be prosecuted. I need the chance to be able to stay. Now, of course, what's everybody's immediate retort? Well, you should have done that in the first place. Well, some of these people did. Some of these people did go through this process. Or listen, some of these people have been here for 30 years and they've got kids that are in their 20s and they haven't had any problems and they've been working and paying taxes and their kids are here and their kids are United States citizens. I think what's been kind of captured in terms of being completely distorted is the following. And I'll speak from being a place as a Democrat, and I'm not doing this to politicize.
Yes, you are.
But I'm here to make a point. As a Democrat, I don't want somebody who's going to be committing crimes in the United States. I'm a former prosecutor. You know that, David. I spent half my career prosecuting criminals and really bad ones. I don't want criminals to be living here. So there has to be a distinction drawn. I think everybody agrees. You don't want a criminal here who's going to be, hurting people, hurting our loved ones, and doing bad things. But that also applies to United States citizens, too. I don't want a U.S. citizen committing a crime, hurting my family, hurting my loved ones. They should be duly prosecuted, too. There's no distinction being drawn. Right now, they're just saying because you are from a certain country or because you look a certain way, we're just going to say, you know what, we're not going to keep you here in the United States. And that's what's un-American about what's happening. That's the lack of due process. Due process says, I get the chance to be heard before you do something. Listen, there's a famous guy, Kilmar Garcia, Abrego Garcia. Everybody talks about him, and they should, although there's hundreds of people that are now being in custody and that are being deported. The reason why Kilmar Abrego Garcia is so important is he needs to be brought back to the United States, David, so that he can actually explain why he should not be in a certain place, right? And if at the end of the day, there has to be a ruling, and by the way, in his instance, there was a ruling by a judge that said he should not be returned to his home country. But if at the end of the day, after he's had all of this chance, David, and a judge says, you know what, you can't stay here, then you know what, goodbye. And if you're an illegal reentry, you should be prosecuted for being an illegal reentry. But
Katie, so your real argument here seems to be that you don't mind the result. You mind the process getting to the result. And that's
100%.
an interesting
It
point of
has,
view to
it
have.
has to be a distinction with a difference, does it not? Do I believe in an amnesty pathway? Sure. For people that have been here and that haven't been committing crimes and have been participating in the United States democracy in terms of the process of being in the American dream?
But
Absolutely.
as a prosecutor, Katie, you've prosecuted and had convicted innocent people.
No.
You're going to say not one time did you get a conviction of someone who was innocent? Not one time?
Did I take somebody to trial that was found guilty that was innocent?
Yes. Do you
It,
believe, let me try to frame it another way so you don't get upset with me. Do you believe there's
oh, I'm not
anyone in
upset.
prison
I'm
who's
actually
innocent?
I'm not upset. I'm actually thinking to myself, if you took a plea, did you take a plea? Did I force you to take a plea? I didn't force you to take a plea, but
No,
if you took a plea,
I'm talking about a jury result, and I'm talking about in prison. The argument that you may have against capital punishment, the argument that many people would have is, hey, some people are innocent. I in law school, Katie, I worked with Barry Scheck, the
yeah,
Innocence
the Innocence
Project.
Project.
The whole thing is people who are in prison whose DNA shows that they didn't do it. That must, to your core say we can't have that. You can't have innocent people. So isn't your issue that you're trying to make it so nobody gets deported or is fearing deportation or is in danger of deportation? We can't have anybody in that position who doesn't deserve to be in that position.
We
Isn't that your main theory?
we can't have anybody in any position where they're not afforded the opportunity to be a part of the process that's been set forth that's supposed to be applicable to all of us, regardless of our citizenship. That's my position when it
Okay,
comes
but
to
then are
that.
you saying the people who went through the process who still get then put in prison who are innocent, is that then okay? So if we did have a process in place, and I'm certainly not saying that we do, but if we did, then we have to live with the results of that process.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
So
Because here's the here listen, and I don't speak in universal, wholesale concepts with no exceptions, right? But here's a little bit of how on both sides the logic is kind of tough, right, on this, because I agree that I do think the system does fail every once in a while, but I do think that it's the whole social contract, right? I live here with you in this place and we agree to be a part of a social contract, and part of that social contract includes living and breathing and abiding by certain laws and regulations and policies, etc. That's what we agree to do. If you don't want to be a part of that process, then you're not a part of the social contract. And so you're not a part of being in our system. So I think I have to say that what's happening here is people that are not being given the chance, and I agree that sometimes people either get railroaded or there's errors made or whatever. But what's interesting, David, is people are not even given the chance to be a part of even that flawed process. In this instance, they are not even given a chance to defend themselves or to be able to present a case in that flawed process.
I
So if
want
you
to
and I if you and I can agree that the process isn't perfect, which it isn't, because to your point, you have clear examples of when the process has failed. I am not saying in any way we shouldn't live without the processes or the system, because I think that's anarchy, right? I don't think we should have that. And so I think that people are not even given the chance to be a part of that process when they are being taken into custody and summarily locked up and shipped out of the country in the dead of night. That's the other thing that we talk about, and you as a lawyer remember this. We talk about consciousness of guilt. And when I argue in front of a jury, I tell a jury, look at this person's actions or conduct. That's evidence of their consciousness of guilt. They did something to be able to hide what they were doing, or they wanted to be able to, obscure what they've been doing because they know what they're doing is wrong or has been wrong. In this instance, when you're taking people away in the dead of night and flying them on planes to God knows where, and then you're like, sorry, don't have them in custody anymore, can't bring them back. And then in the instance of somebody like Kilmar Abrego Garcia, you now indict him after the fact. And they're like, oh, yeah, by the way, we couldn't bring him back, but now we can bring him back. And when we bring him back, we're going to prosecute him. And by the way, he's probably going to end up getting, deported in the end again. I mean, it's what you want to have is you want to have a level and fair playing field, David, and that's not happening right now. for a large subset of our American population. And
Well, we
I don't think
certainly
anybody should want that, period. That's it. And the irony is you and I see this a lot. You're not in South Florida as much as you were before, but the irony is we see people that are absolutely just up in arms and upset about it when they or people that they are affiliated with voted for this to be the kind of this system that's in place.
So I
And
wanted to
so,
get to that, if you don't mind,
yeah,
because what's happening now is that people are surprised at certain things that Trump has done, President Trump has done. They're surprised that Project 2025 is actually the playbook that they're using. They're surprised that Elon Musk both was a friend and now is a foe. They're just surprised at all sorts of things. And to me, Trump has been great in that regard because that was exactly what he ran for office, saying he was going to do. So all
that
I've
is
ever
the
asked for out of
irony.
politicians is to say what you're going to do and then let the people decide. And
That is the irony, isn't it?
the amazing irony is that the scores of millions of people who voted for him, and now the question is, are they getting what they wanted or are they not? And that will manifest itself in the midterms and then again in the next presidential election. But what I wanted to talk to you about and bring it around to is the process. Forget the allegations of elections being stolen. Just forget any of that because when you win, you don't allege it. And that is normal on a sports field and normal everywhere. But
And yet he still does, but go on. Yeah.
well, he's not for the one he won, only still the one he lost. I don't he wait, did I miss that? Is he saying the election was rigged in the one he won? I
No,
missed that one.
he always alleges that there's some type of election integrity issues, even for the ones that he wins. So,
But your contempt, and you're open about this. The lane you've
yeah.
chosen is to have contempt for President Trump. And my lane is to ask you that you are acknowledging that the people spoke. I think you'll acknowledge that there were enough votes and electoral votes that he's president. You acknowledge that, right?
Yeah, he's the president of the United States. Yes.
Two, do you acknowledge that he is doing the things that he campaigned to do when he ran for president?
Yes, on steroids, he's doing it. Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
the part that scares me the most is that at some point we have to say, well, that seems to be our country then. And thank God we're in a country where both sides you're supposed to be able to protest peacefully. You're supposed to be able to give your point of view and you're supposed to be able to do it through the ballot box. And I touched on this on the show. And that was the whole issue I had with what happened in Minnesota. That if we're murdering politicians who disagree with the right or disagree with the left, then we are not a democracy. We've turned into something totally different. And I would assume that that end of democracy or the threat that that we should be worried, does that not consume you more than any particular issue?
I think political violence on either side is unacceptable. I think to your original point, I mean, we call this the find out part, right? I mean, this was the part about what Trump said he was going to do that he's delivering on. But what's interesting is it's sometimes people have to go through the personal impact of some type of trauma to be able to have empathy. That's just human nature for some. Some people are capable of empathy without having to actually sustain a loss or that trauma to be able to understand why a certain policy may not be palatable or may not be what you would want to have experience for yourself. So when we see people that have so much regret about the idea that they allowed this guy to be back in the Oval Office and to deliver on the promises that he made during his campaign, that he was going to do X, Y, and Z, and now he's doing these things, like that is obviously something where I struggle. Just if I could be you say nothing personal, but I'm going to be very personal. I struggle with this because yeah, there's a part of me that's like, you know what? You asked for this, you got it. I don't want to hear you bitching and complaining about it because it's exactly what you voted for. And to your point, he didn't stutter when he said it, right? He told you, this is what I'm going to do and this is how I'm going to deliver it. But then there's a part of me that says, but that's not who I am. And other people are being drawn into this huge kind of net of misery and terror that had nothing to do with this, that didn't vote for him, that obviously didn't want this to happen to their families or to their loved ones. And then you see what happens in places like LA, where about, I'd say, if you had to use percentages, 99% of the protests that were happening were peaceful, lawful assemblies pursuant to the First Amendment right of free speech and expression and lawful assembly. But when you pull in the National Guard and you pull in the Marines and you escalate it the way that he's been doing it, how is anybody surprised when there's political violence? They shouldn't be. So this lies, all of this, what happened in Minnesota, what continues to happen with political violence, this really does lie squarely at the feet of Donald Trump. And by the way, not just him, other members of the GOP that don't have enough of a spine to say to him, look, you want to, here's another example, you want to clean up fraud, waste, and abuse? I'm all for it. That's the other thing, again. Another narrative that gets hijacked by the GOP that suggests that the Democrats don't want it. Of course, if you're just a person, you don't want fraud, waste, and abuse. But there has to be a process by which it happens, that you cannot just go summarily with a chainsaw, destroy the federal government, put hundreds of thousands of people out of jobs, and then be like, oh, sorry, you didn't get your cancer research, so you couldn't get your cure for this illness. Sorry. Or, oh, hey, I'm not going to help you, and you're not going to get your SNAP benefits. Tough shit. You can't do that. Like, you cannot do that. And so what's happening here is the same thing that's happening with the immigration, the same thing that's happening with our federal agencies, the same thing that's happening even with the ability to be able to protest. The escalation that's happening is lying squarely at the feet of Donald Trump and other members of the GOP that aren't saying this is not the way that we're supposed to do this. And I mean, I'm sorry that I had to be political about it, but he's the person who's sitting in the Oval Office. There are people that are around him that are implementing the policies that he wants. And I don't think.
But you know, you have a solution, Katie. And it's important to point out to the audience what the solution is, because they hear it from me. I just, in 2 minutes, please hear it from you. What is the solution if you're unhappy with what you see?
Vote. And people get mad at me when they're like,
so easy.
Oh, why do you say it like that? It's so, because it really is that easy. If you don't like your judges, those judges are getting appointed by your senators, your presidents, and then they're going through a Senate confirmation process that involves your senators. I mean, those people didn't just walk in the door. They didn't just say, you know what, I'm going to stake my claim to this space in DC. They were voted into office. Now, listen, is there gerrymandering, David? Yes. Is there voter suppression? Yes. Is there a process where people are having their votes not have the same value as somebody else's vote? 100%. But I'm telling you right now, part of that happens too because judges rule on lawsuits that are brought, right, as to whether or not there's voter suppression or gerrymandering. Gerrymandering happens on legislative levels with people that are elected in office. So the problem we have is we're kind of past that point of saying maybe just go and vote, period, have a nice day. We have to kind of reverse a lot of the bad stuff that's happened. And we need to kind of get back to that place where just saying just go and vote is the cure-all for what it is.
Well, I think it's the start. And I could keep going, but we have to wrap up. First of all, thank you for your time. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for being letting me have the space to do it.
No, it's unique for the audience on a sports business show to be able to hear two sides of a story and what's happening. And we want our audience to sort of choose for themselves what they believe, but we want to give them all the facts. And there are facts on all sides. And a lot of times in the media, you're only giving one side of a story. And so we try to give both sides and give our audience the benefit of intellect and saying you choose. But then be careful what you choose because you're going to get what you choose. And your last point to me was obviously so very important. It's not just about voting. It's understanding what you're voting for, who you're voting for, and why.
Yeah.
Katie, independent journalist, tell everyone about your show.
I'm on YouTube, Katie Phang News Channel. I'm also on Substack at Katie Phang. I'm on all social media at Katie Phang.
And you're a top 4. Thank you, Katie.
Thanks.
That was Katie Phang. Coca, I imagine are you sweating right now? Because that was about as political as we're going to get on this show, which is fine by me. You know, I'm always happy to do that. And Katie Phang is someone who I guess if you ask for the scouting report, people would say, oh, she's definitely anti-Trump. That is her lane. Her lane is that of someone who is left. And I would tell you, I've known Katie Phang for quite a while, and what she provides to you are facts. And people forget she dropped something in there that do not ignore. She was a prosecutor and a really good one. She is not simply about being liberal or simply about saying, if you are not liberal, you are not a friend. That is not what she's about. It's about making you understand the legal implications of the things that are happening, because short of having a rule of law, you end up with the word she said, which is anarchy. And I'll raise my hand where I am politically. I don't want anarchy.